All right, great. Well, thank you everyone in the audience for joining us today for another conversation in the Elections Group's Accelerating Excellence series, where we at the Elections Group highlight the excellent work of election officials from across the country and help other election officials implement similar programs. I am Danny Davenport, election expert with the Elections Group.
And I'm Rebecca Roberson, Senior Election Communications Specialist with the Elections Group. Today we're here with members from the Coalition of Bay Area Election Officials. We have Marin County Registrar of Voters, Linda Roberts, Contra Costa County Deputy Clerk and Recorder, Tommy Gong, and Evelyn Mendez, who is the Public and Legislative Affairs Manager for the Santa Clara County Registrar of Voters. The Coalition of Bay Area Election Officials is a unique communications collaborative that assembled to pool resources, creativity, cut costs, and promote efficiency.
We know that many of you in the audience today are state or local election officials, and we hope that the coalition story, as told by our panelists, will inspire you to form similar groups in your own states, cities, and counties. Here at the Elections Group, we are so excited about the coalition's work that we created a case study and an implementation guide inspired by the coalition. You should be able to find links to both of those documents in the chat. And immediately following our conversation, we will provide highlights from our implementation guide so that audience members like you can start implementing similar programs in your communities. Before we begin, if you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. And at the end of this conversation, we will try to address all questions asked as time allows. So now, finally, it is time to meet our panelists. And let's kick that off with some introductions. So Linda, if you don't mind introducing yourself to the audience.
Thank you, Danny. I'm Linda Roberts, and my work in elections started in Salt Lake City municipal government in the 1980s. That's when the city administered their own elections, and I was there until about 1991. My career path took a different direction for many years, and then I came back to elections administration in 2007 when I accepted a position in Mono County, California, which is in the Eastern Sierra, that borders Nevada. I was there for 7 years in position as registrar, and then came to Marin County in 2014, and I've been here a little over 8.5 years.
Awesome. Thank you, Linda. And then Evelyn, I'm going to have you introduce yourself next.
Okay. Hi, I'm Evelyn Mendez from the Santa Clara County Registrar of Voters Office. I'm the Public and Legislative Affairs Manager. I have close to 30 years of experience in elections. Before coming to the Santa Clara County Registrar of Voters Office, I worked for the Secretary of State for 24 years. So I was there for 24 years, then came here. I am the mouthpiece of the ROV, so I speak on behalf of our county to the media, and I run I'm the manager of the social media team. So we have a lot of exciting things going on here. So excited that you guys invited us to do this.
Awesome. Thank you. We are very excited to chat with you and learn more about all of that experience. And then finally, Tommy, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Sure. Tommy Gong, Deputy Clerk Recorder for Contra Costa County. I've been in the business for 20 years, so I'm the newbie here. And started in Stanislaus County in 2003, and then went to the Central Coast in San Luis Obispo for about 16 years, and then landed here back in the Bay Area with Contra Costa County in the last 1.5 years. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. We're happy to have you.
Great. Thank you all for joining us today. To get things started, we are actually going to show a video that was provided to us by the coalition. So go ahead and get things kicked off with that.
Coalition of Greater Bay Area Elections Officials is a collaborative group of Bay Area counties from Northern California that work together to increase public trust in elections in our shared media market. Our mission is to collaborate, communicate, and provide access to accurate, current, and transparent election information across the Bay Area. Our 11 Bay Area counties include Alameda, Contra Costa, Marin, Monterey, Napa, San Benito, San Mateo, Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, Solano, and Sonoma. We represent over 4.3 million voters in California. Since early 2022, we have collaborated on press releases, created election fact sheets, educational videos, editorials, social media posts, and creative ways to combat mis- and disinformation. Our counties meet weekly to share innovative ideas and strategize ways to build trust with our voters. We are proud to share that in the short time that we have been collaborating together, our accolades include receiving the Democracy Award from the Election Center in 2022 for our efforts in outstanding national practices. Follow us on our Facebook page for up-to-date information at Bay Area Votes or on our website at www.bayareavotes.org.
Awesome. I know we can't get a round of applause from the chat, but I would love if, you give yourself a round of applause. If you couldn't tell in the audience, Evelyn was narrating that video. I also just learned as we prepared for this webinar that that was the first time this video was shown publicly. So thank you so much for letting us premiere one of your awesome materials. So with that, enough for me. Let's kick off the conversation. And Tommy, I want to start with a question for you. So where did the idea for this coalition come from?
Yeah, it's actually twofold for me. One is, as a result of the 2020 election and all of the skepticism that came about with those that, had a tough time accepting the results of the 2020 general election, there was a great need to provide, to combat mis and disinformation out there regarding elections. So that was one reason why. And then when I landed in the Bay Area here in Contra Costa, I was like trying to figure out what news station was I going to watch in the morning to cover the local news. And in looking at every station, TV station, I realized that they cover the entire Bay Area, whether it's all the way out to Santa Clara, all the way up to Napa, or all the way east into Alameda County, for example. So I had this idea, why don't the counties group together, work together, collaborate on unified messaging so that we can actually educate and outreach to our voters and to the public in general to raise our the trust in elections, the public trust in elections.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Great, thank you. Can you all, this is going to be a question for everybody, but can you all tell us about the ways that the coalition and the collaborative nature of the work that you all work to, or the ways that you work together and the collaborative nature of that work? I think we're going to start with Tommy for this one, and then we'll ping it to everybody else as well.
Yeah, so it started out, once we had this idea of working together, then we started to reach out to all of the counties that comprise of the greater Bay Area and reaching out to them and saying, hey, we have this great idea about, how we might be able to work together. And that started at the very end of 2021. And so in 2022, we started to meet more regularly via Zoom, because that way then we can cut down on travel time and everything for the group to be able to meet together and to work on messaging, to work on the topics that we felt were important for us to educate the public about. And so that's how we started out in terms of how we were able to start working together in that way.
Awesome.
Great.
Okay, so I want to follow up and dig into that a little bit. So this is a question for any of the panelists. I'll let you guys decide who wants to jump in first on this one. But could you please tell us about some of the ways that the coalition benefits your jurisdiction?
I'll jump in. I saw the coalition as an opportunity to build stronger relationships with my colleagues in the Bay Area and to learn from them and to expand the capacity to accomplish more, such as creating videos, which my small office doesn't have capacity, but, Santa Clara offers that capacity. And, it's just nice to be able to discuss nuts and bolts about different things, election-related issues that impact all of us, like voter registration, deadlines, vote by mail, security, mis and disinformation. And as a group, we're able to share ideas and talk about ways that we can present a unified message.
And for us, we're one of the bigger counties out of the 11 Bay Area counties, but I think we all collaboratively agree that this is a group effort. We have the same message. We have the same last day to register to vote. We have the same election day. So it's something that we collaborate together to make sure we pick up on each other's strengths. Tommy, he could speak very well. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of people that have different experiences that contribute to the whole of the group. And it's very helpful, especially when, we have a Facebook page that someone else can run. It doesn't have to be our county. we have someone else that can put a fact sheet together and collaborate with all of the registrars. So everybody just collaborates on all the ideas, and it works really well for the 11 of us. And I know a lot of the counties in this state can benefit from what we're doing.
And I'll just say, you know, also to add to that is really how different we are in terms of sizes between the 11 counties. I mean, we're starting as low as like 50,000 voters, like for instance, in Napa County and in San Benito counties, and then all the way up to, I think it's 1.2 million in Santa Clara, and Alameda is just closely behind there. And so it's so interesting that even though we're so widely disparate in terms of our registered voter base, that we still have the same issues. We still have voters that are trying to find out more about the election so that they can have more faith in the election and its results.
Thank you so much. And I love that. One of the things I thought was really special when we were researching the Coalition of the Elections group was just that magic of how you all sort of activate whichever superhero you need from the jurisdiction that's sort of best equipped to handle something. So thank you for that. I also had a quick follow-up on that question. This is also for any or all of the panelists. Could you see those benefits you just described applying in other states or jurisdictions outside of the Greater Bay Coalition?
Yes.
Yeah, let me just say real quick that, you know, one thing we started to realize, even as we're starting to educate the public more and more about what we do, is how little the public really knows what we do when we're conducting elections. And it's important for us as election officials to advocate for ourselves, to advocate for the profession, and make sure that the public really understands all the ins and outs, all of the safeguards, all of the security measures that are circulating around, like, you know, the security of their ballots, for example, and the security of the vote by mail processing system. So these are all things that I came to really realize what's really important for us, and what we can learn from each other, applying it to even larger jurisdictions, whether larger county or even statewide, having this type of messaging out there.
Great, thank you so much.
I'll just tack on that I think we have a strong and really supportive state association of elections officials, and we all want the same thing. We want to administer elections to the best of our abilities within the law. And in my opinion, any of the outreach efforts we do, whether it's at the county level or a group of counties or the state level, it reinforces the message that as California elections officials, we are the reliable source of information. So in whatever ways a county chooses to inform the public, I believe this benefits the state. And I think, you know, other states that have a sense of a strong association could do the same thing in their states.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. This is a great collaborative program. To that point, but a little bit different. When you all initially assembled, did you or can you speak to any pushback that you received from any other jurisdictions? And how did you handle that? And this is for any and all panelists.
No one pushed back on us. This was great. No, I'm just kidding. Of course, there are people that, you know, don't understand how we're going to collaborate when we all have different sizes and different sizes of our counties and the role that we play in the entire state. But I think people don't understand that there's not really a state or even anywhere in the United States that they work alone. No county works alone. There's no way that we would be able to. And we have colleagues that live in another county because it's the county next door. But collaboratively, we're collecting information on why we are hiring, and all of us are hiring. It's not just us. You know what I mean? So I think we help each other a lot, but some counties don't understand. How do you make that work if one county is a vote center and one county is a VCA county and the other county is a polling place county? It's still the same message. That's the pushback. I mean, that's what we give back to them, that it's, like I said, the same election, the same filing dates, the same message that we want to put out there, that it's safe to vote. So I think we push that message together.
And especially, you know, in California here, we're sending every voter a ballot in the mail, for example, automatically. So how can we leverage, knowing that we're all required to do this, how can we leverage that our voters throughout the entire Bay Area, for example? How can we, provide them the information they need to know, the options that they have in the ways that they can return their ballots to us? But I will say some things that I kind of encountered a bit it was interesting. Our first editorial that we were writing, you're dealing with 11 different election officials, right? With 11 different temperaments. Some are a little more aggressive, if you want to put it that way, than others. And so as we were writing that, for example, there was an example where we were using about the peaceful transition of power. And I know that did cause a pause for some of the election officials, that they felt that was kind of strong language or too strong a language. And so we needed to soften that up. And obviously, this is a group effort. And so, there was no problem in being able to change the language so that we can, again, advocate for our profession, find a way, find that common ground that we could have in order to deliver that message.
That was awesome. Thank you both. So I'm going to ask a few questions in a row. It's not a speed round, still take your time with them. So the first one, though, I'm going to put out is just for Tommy, and then I'm going to have a follow-up for the whole panel. So Tommy, you told us earlier about sort of the genesis of the idea for this program. I'm going to ask you to hop in a time machine and travel back in time. If you were traveling back to that Tommy on that day who had that idea, and you're about to start this program over again, what advice would you give yourself?
Wow. I would say to learn how the media works, number one. It was funny because we put out a press release to the media about 8 weeks in advance because we had lined up all the topics that we wanted to put out. And so we wanted to put out about redistricting to the public, and because that was early on in the process. And, we were all ready to go. We had all of our sound bites were ready to go, and 8 weeks before the election, and it was crickets. The media didn't follow up with us or anything. And, that was a sombering lesson for us in that, the media has, we're competing with other interests throughout the Bay Area that the media is covering as well. And so when is the right time in order to leverage the media? When are they interested in you? And that's going to be about, no earlier than 5 weeks before the election, more like 4 weeks as the ballots are going out to the public. And then things start snowballing as we get closer to the election, especially the weekend before the election. Then, of course, they're all interested in what we're doing then in that case. And so that was a big lesson for us to learn from. And one other lesson is that we have to really simplify the message to the public. It's something that we realize that we're always using acronyms and all of these different things that we're responsible for. There's a name for them, and sometimes that doesn't ring true, that doesn't resonate with the public. And so we have to find a way in order to communicate with them in a way that they can really understand what it is that we're trying to get across to them. And so those are two lessons that I really learned from in order to, if I had to give advice to somebody, to a new group that's looking to doing that, those are probably my two first pieces of advice.
And I'd like to tag on to that and say, start earlier in the election cycle, start earlier before an election cycle, because there's just a lot of practical things you have to figure out. When are you going to have your meetings? How often? Who's going to set up the agendas and schedule the Zoom meetings? And what is your mission? What are your goals? And so to be able to start earlier to just lay the practical groundwork so that you can then focus on getting the work done to get the messaging in place and out in a timely manner.
And I'd like to add on to that really quick.
Absolutely.
I do like we get together with all of the head honchos in the county, but I think if I were going to go back into a time machine, I would encourage counties or anybody that's doing a coalition like this to get some of the staff involved. So the staff that's boots on the ground that are actually sitting in front of the voters, only because they do have something to contribute to the messages. They do have something to contribute to the ideas on how we can implement everything. Yes, we have to get all the leaders to agree with everything, but getting the staff involved really helped, especially on my team. I do have student interns that play a part on a lot of this. When I say put a video together, they can put one together really fast. So like I said, we all collaborate, but I think it's having different levels of the organization involved that helps.
Awesome. Thank you. Those were all fantastic pieces of advice. Now, I wish we could just have another hour for all three of you to just give advice on your program. Tommy, you reminded me of something that really struck me about what you all do, which is how deliberate you are with the way you communicate. And that is, down to not just the content, but even the timeline. And I think that's something amazing that a lot of people throughout the country, election officials, including myself in another life, could have learned from. So that's really awesome. Thank you. And then I have a quick follow-up, and this is for the whole panel. Please tell us a little bit about some of the resources the coalition has created, like videos and fact sheets, and how they have benefited your jurisdictions. And I'll kick this one off with Evelyn.
Okay, so we did put fact sheets together, which it seems like everybody would know how to vote by mail or how, the different, but people don't. We collaboratively worked on those fact sheets together. So every county had input into it because it does. Some of the minor things about elections might vary from county to county. We put press releases together that we all collaborated on. Like Tommy said earlier, we wanted to make sure that message was getting out there the same way. I think Linda talked about it too. We all have the same dates and deadlines. We put together videos. Some counties, like I said, are smaller and aren't able to produce videos or social media content, and we were able to help each other with that. So I think that's some of the things, like the website. We talked about the different pieces to that website, and our county hosted it, but we do not put that website together by ourselves. Every piece of it is a part of what everyone is doing. Linda said she likes pointing people to that because we have dates and deadlines and key dates for every county, not just for us. So, and there are links to all the counties. So it's a collaborative effort.
Awesome. Thank you, Evelyn. And then Linda, I'm going to give you the same question. Could you please just tell us a little bit about the resources from the coalition and how they've benefited your jurisdiction?
Well, I just find the expanded capacity of having a bigger group to be able to do things as we know, Evelyn's group can do these amazing videos that because my county and my staff is so small, we'd love to, but we just don't have the capacity. And so being able to have informational videos for the public that we can point to and say, hey, go here and you'll learn something about this procedure, this process. And then, having more people putting together news releases is really helpful. It's something I've done since I've been here, news releases, but, to have kind of a fresh approach. I tend to use the template and just kind of change dates and tweak them here and there, but to have a fresh approach with our coalitions, all the names of our counties on these press releases, it just makes me feel like we have a strong backbone of election officials just saying the same thing. And hopefully that really does instill a sense of trust for the public.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Linda. And then, sorry, Tommy, I'm going to throw it to you next.
Yeah, I'll just add on, some of the things that we did in terms of structurally is that we created a press release that we all shared and we were all approved by, by the principals. And then they were released at the same time. So simultaneously, we would release them, let's say Wednesday morning, 8 a.m., everyone send out to all of your press contacts this press release. And so, even though let's say San Francisco Chronicle might be getting, 5 different press releases, all the same, coming from each respective county that, oh, this is news. This is something I think I want to pay attention to. Let me follow up with my local cohorts to do an interview, do an article about. And, it's that type of strategy that we had. And we also put together in terms of our fact sheets when we're going to release them out to the public. So, we're sending out our vote by mail ballots 29 days before the election. So that's the right time to put out information about what are all the safeguards and security measures regarding vote by mail ballots. And, then we're going to talk about voting systems and security as we're getting closer to the election. all of the information about in-person voting, during as we get closer to, and especially during the weekend before the election, that it's still not too late, to vote. And then the canvas, in terms of what are the things that we have to accomplish after election day before we can all certify our own respective elections. And so it's like trying to get out the message, spoon feed the information out to the public strategically as ballots are being sent out, as we're doing our testing of our machines, as we're preparing our in-person voting locations. These are all the things that we're trying to do strategically in order to, put it out to the public.
Awesome. Thank you. That was fantastic.
This has all been such great information. For our next question, I do want to take another step back. I know we already talked about a time machine, and at that time you all spoke to some lessons that you've learned. But I do want to ask you all if you can please tell us about one of your biggest learning experiences in creating the coalition. So we'll go ahead and start with Evelyn.
Hi. One of the biggest learning experiences in the coalition, I think it is learning what each other does. I know that we put a path of the ballot together, and it was eye-opening to us because we're a VCA, a Voters Choice Act county, that we had to go back and see how another county deals with polling places. So, I mean, it was getting to know the counties next to you. I mean, when we're talking, we have 110 vote centers, and the county next to us has 4 or 5. We don't understand, like, what do you mean you guys have all your workers? We don't have any of our, So I think that was a good learning experience. Just, it's bigger than just our county, even though our county is the biggest out of the 11. We still have to help the counties next to us. Someone lives in Alameda County, and that's right across the freeway. You know what I mean? So I think that we have to learn about the different counties in our coalition.
For me, a big learning experience has been that sometimes it's really difficult to implement good ideas. And for example, we're trying to figure out how we can expand our messaging to paid advertising, and trying to figure out between all the counties, okay, how are we going to share the costs? How is the practical side of paying that bill going to work? And so, some things you have to continue to hammer out and try to find a way. I don't think it should stop a good idea. It just takes some figuring.
Yeah, I'll second that. That was one of the roadblocks that we encountered going into the November election. Is there was a campaign we were looking at as a combination, and had it broken down by the number of registered voters in terms of ratio, how many registered voters, let's say, Santa Clara has compared to Marin, and it was priced out accordingly. And so we had everything kind of broken out, but then it was hard to on board, let's say, 11 accounts with that particular media company. And so it was certainly some lessons to be learned in that case. And I think the other thing I came to realize, as I say, again, I'm the newbie here with only 20 years of experience, but part of that is that, 20 years ago, and I've heard this time and time again, it used to be that a successful election is one where you never make the news, right? Because if you made the news, it was bad news. There was something that went wrong with the election. And so, the election officials tended to shun the media, tended not to, embrace the media. And that's something that's required of us today, just because of the mere nature of the work that we're involved in, and the skepticism that is out there, that we do have to advocate for ourselves. We really do need to embrace it and make those media contacts and be willing to reach out to them. I think I took them a bit of the media off balance, because I was knocking on their door. I was calling them saying, hey, we have a story to feed you here. And it's like, okay, we'd like to have you on, before the election. I go, well, I have like 4 different things I can talk to you about. And, maybe we can have 4 different meetings, for the month before the election. And they were like, well, that's probably a little bit too much, Tommy. So I was like, okay, how about 2 times then, at least 2 times. And so we worked that out with them so that, again, we can get that messaging, the appropriate messaging out to the voters at the appropriate time. And so, again, it's that embracing of the media. This is a new medium for a lot of us in this way, but I think it's generating a lot of positive benefit for all of us.
Those were great points. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like that message of figuring out how to navigate dealing with the media probably resonated with everyone in the audience, because you're right. It is it used to be the case you just don't want to be in the news. So that's awesome. Thank you all. So my next question is kind of a big one. What's next for the coalition? What upcoming plans or projects do you have that you'd like to share? And anybody can kick this one off, whoever would like to jump in.
Well, I'll just start off by saying we're already talking about 2024. Anybody who works in elections understands that 2024 is knocking on the door. It is not far away at all. So we're talking about what kind of messaging, new approaches. For example, we've been talking about voting behavior and how do we encourage people to get their vote by mail ballot returned before Election Day. You know, people want results right shortly after an election, but these vote by mail ballots take time to process. So we're just brainstorming some things, some messages that we hope will move voters just a little bit in taking action, not waiting up till Election Day.
And for me, as a coalition, we are also focusing on some of the youth voters. We're focusing on pre-registration. We have over 1 million in the state of California that are pre-registered to vote. We just hit that mark the other day. Thank you, Secretary of State, for sharing that. But in our county, I mean, we're reaching, 50,000 or even more than that in our counties. How many 16, 17-year-olds can pre-register to vote? So we're trying to push that message, because those 17-year-olds especially are going to be able to vote in that 2024 election. So if they don't know about it, if they don't even know that they could pre-register to vote in our state, I don't know why they don't know. We should be pushing that out there. Once they're 16 and 17, they're automatically registered to vote when they're 18. They don't even need to do anything. They're already registered, so they'll be ready to vote. But then the message comes with what Linda said. We got to tell them to vote early. We got to tell them there's an election. Some people don't even know there's a primary election. They only think there's an election in November. So all those kinds of messages I think we're focusing on for this year, along with security and other things.
Yeah, and I'll also add that, whereas last year we were focusing on redistricting, for example, and the effects, how that might have on the voters. So this coming presidential primary election, I think it has to do with educating the public about crossover voting, so to speak, or that there's going to be, partisan party ballots that are going to be sent to voters, especially now that we're sending voters a ballot in the mail automatically. So if we can get ahead of the game for voters to understand, if you want to vote on a particular party ballot, you're going to need to take these particular actions, for example. So, starting out earlier with things like that. Also, something that I was really interested in doing is engaging with academia, in particular UC Berkeley and Stanford University, to work with us collaboratively, trying to find out like what would help with messaging that might be able to be more resonating with the public. And so let's do some research on this and find out more. And it's something we can do preceding the primary election as well as preceding the general election. Let's find out what we can learn from it, and then let's pivot as we need to going into the November election for 2024. So it's really a learning process for us in this way. And I'll just also say that, one thing that also just morphs itself as we do these weekly meetings is that we're always learning from one another. So it's like, hey, how are you doing candidate filing, for example, or recounts? If that be the case, we're all vetting ideas through one another. So it's not only just for the purpose of the coalition for reaching out to the public, but it's also provided this opportunity for us to really kind of vet through our processes with one another and to strengthen them across the board as we're learning from each other.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
I think that pretty much wraps up a lot of our questions that we had prepared. So I do want to kind of open up the floor to all of you at this time and see if there's anything else that you'd like to add. in this moment. If there's something that we didn't touch in a question or something that you'd like to elaborate a little bit more on, anything else that you'd like to add, I'll open up the floor to you all.
I'll jump in first. I just want to say that election administration is really complex. And I like working as a team with the other counties in the Bay Area to develop our messaging, show a professional solidarity, learn from them, make what I do at my local level better. And one of our goals as a coalition is to increase public trust. And I really hope that having this solidarity of counties in the Bay Area helps with that message.
Thank you. Evelyn, Tommy, anything to add?
I was waiting for Tommy to unmute, but I'll go next.
Beat him to it.
I do appreciate that the 11 counties, I think we were all talking about in the beginning how many years of experience we have. I think we're all those people that once we get into elections, we don't want to leave elections, I guess. But I mean, we have almost 60 years of experience on this panel, but just the group, the 11 Bay Area counties, these are elections officials that have been around a long time, that have a lot of experiences, that have seen all the changes. I think it's very beneficial to see that, to bounce those ideas, like I said, off of each other. Or if there was something we used to do another way, a couple years ago, bring some of those ideas back if they worked. But I did want to also add, you said something about the media, and I know Tommy reached out to media and was like, hey, let's do this for interview session. But I mean, sometimes that doesn't always work, but with us and with the media, there are ways that they come here, they come to us. We have a media day here. They all came here. They got footage that they also used in other counties. They're also like, they wanted to see how the vote by mail machines worked, but Contra Costa has the same one. So they were recording like our footage, but using it to share the message for the entire Bay Area. It's NBAC Bay Area that's coming over here. It's like the Bay Area channels that we're all watching in our respective counties, but the message is coming from all of us. I think it's like strength in numbers and strength in, trust, like Linda said. And yeah, so I like that.
I'll just say, the collaboration and the collegiality between the counties is just really, made us comfortable with one another and really allow us to really open up and, share our thoughts about, how things are going for us, and that we really have a support system for one another this way. Even as far as, we created our own code of ethics, for example, and standards of professionalism, which I think is something that we need to have, obviously. And so, let me just read to you the preamble to this, because it just means so much to me that, we believe freedom is an inherent human right. Freedom is fragile in nature, best maintained and nurtured through the democratic process. The success of the democratic process requires fair and open elections, which accurately reflects the intent of the electorate. As election officials, we are entrusted with the responsibility to protect and promote public trust and confidence by conducting accurate, fair, and transparent elections. To reach this goal, we must be guided by ethical, nonpartisan, law-abiding principles. Through a dedicated adherence to a code of ethics and the standards of conduct, we demonstrate our pledge to freedom, our pride in our profession, and a commitment to the democratic process. I mean, isn't that an awesome creed for us all to follow? So it just really just unified us even more so.
That was great. I loved that. Thank you for sharing. And thank you all for a wonderful discussion. We did get a few questions in the chat as we were speaking. Some things we've already spoken to, but maybe good to revisit. So we'll take a look and see what questions we've gotten in the chat. The first one that we have is actually speaking to Evelyn's point from earlier about voters' choice. So I'll just read it verbatim. Some counties in your coalition are Voters' Choice Act counties with vote centers, and some are traditional polling place counties still. How do you overcome those differences and reduce voter confusion with a unified message to voters? And we'll go ahead and start. Since Evelyn, you spoke about this before, we'll start with you.
Okay. I think it's important that we learn what each county does. I think everybody started off polling place and then now everybody's Voters' Choice, but just to learn how each county adapted the principle of what was happening and how each county learned from each other how they got the voters to understand what was going on. We had to get the clear message of what Voters Choice Act was, because we could say VCA, like Tommy said, acronyms that throw people off, but just explaining to voters what that even was, explaining to voters how your methods were going to change. And we do emphasize that the county next to us isn't going to be the same way. We do emphasize, you know, this county's not Voters Choice Act yet; they're getting there. But the way the messages are out there, we together collaboratively come up with ways to explain both processes, just so counties know, and even people across the state, because it could be someone in LA that they can understand that, you know, VCA is happening over there, but it's not happening over here. But like I said, we do come up with ways together to explain when we're sharing that message. It's not just about polling place counties. It's not just about voter choice.
And I think there are just things that are the same anyway. Like we talked about some of them: deadlines, vote by mail ballots all go out at the same time, and, you know, voter registration. So there are things that are just the same for all of us, regardless of what kind of how we administer an election, whether it's polling place or Voters Choice Act, vote center.
Yeah, I'll second that it has, you know, as the coalition, it is sharing about what we have in common, right? So in that way, we're looking at it more universally in the sense that, you know, everyone's received a ballot in the mail, for example. These are your deadlines for returning your ballot in the mail, and that all counties still have an in-person voting component. And so that's how we kind of bridge the gap, that we're all, you know, we're all facilitating in-person voting. And for more specific information, go to your, you know, your specific county's website for, you know, more specific information as to what your in-person voting options are. And so that's a way that we were able to kind of bridge that gap and overcome the differences that we might have, but essentially we are still facilitating all the same thing.
Awesome. I think that was a really great explanation of how all of you account for the differences across counties when you work together. We also received a few questions that were about funding, so I'm going to jump into one of those. The first one we got is, where does your funding come from for this effort? And how do you divide your contributions, including time and other resources, across the jurisdictions? And Tommy, you've got a big smile, so I might throw this one to you first.
So I guess you can say, you know, all of the work of the coalition has been accomplished with blood, sweat, and tears, but not a single penny spent. And that's really truthful, you know, other than, you know, us attempting to make that, you know, that one advertising campaign to date. So it really has been, how can we best leverage our knowledge to the public, and that's through the media. One thing that we weren't able to do as effectively, for example, is public service announcements. It's something that I'm still trying to figure out in the Bay Area. And I, you know, based on my previous experience, I will say, as soon as you do like a radio ad, all of a sudden, you know, some PSAs are available to you. So maybe that's what helps grease the skids a little bit. But, you know, essentially, it has all been with us working together, developing the messaging, and then learning how to work with the media in terms of getting that messaging out at, you know, little to no cost, for example. That's what we did last year. We'd love to be able to do a little more and to broaden our horizons even a little more so. But again, we're still at that point of how can we pull the resources together so that we can effectively put it out to the, you know, to the public collectively.
Awesome. And I'm gonna throw out like just sort of a mini follow-up. How do you all divide your contributions between the jurisdictions? So specifically like time or assignments. We've got a few questions about that in the chat. And I'll open that up to anyone who wants to speak to it.
I don't think that we have like assigned, we don't say, okay, Tommy, you do the minutes and you do this. It's kind of a group effort, and people that have the time, people that have the resources, they step up when we need to, which I think is what's very helpful in our group. If someone, you know, their specialty is press releases, like we said, everybody puts on their different superhero cape in this group and they help and they step up. So there's not really an assigned, you know, Santa Clara has to do the website all the time. You know what I mean? So it's always different people that are contributing.
Yeah, and I think we all want to contribute something. So my team may not have the capacity to do videos, but when it came to creating a video path of a ballot, I was able to step up and say, "Hey, yeah, you can come to our county and do some filming and interview me." And so I do think we just because we all want to do the best we can as elections officials and give voters the best experience in voting. And so we just kind of, as part of our collaboration, as Evelyn said, step up where we can and offer what we can.
Yeah, and I'll just say, the earlier we can begin, like right now, for example, if there was a particular topic that we felt was important to work on, then now's the time to be able to work with the smaller counties, for example, because, in the midst of the election, they're just too busy to be able to do all the other things, that other than the essential things that they have to get done for the election. So in this way, if we can work a little earlier, that gives us the ability to be able to, get more counties involved in particular messaging and all. So that's why we're trying to work on that now, so that for a year from now, we're all better prepared then in this way.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm gonna, I think this is gonna be our last question from the chat. Have you gotten feedback from other colleagues in California who are outside of the coalition? And if so, like what kind of feedback?
I haven't heard any, so I don't know. Tommy or Evelyn, have you heard anything?
Feedback as in, what are we, good feedback, bad feedback? What?
Either one. Just have you, I mean, I'm assuming mostly good feedback, but just have you heard, has the word got out sort of to other counties outside of the Greater Bay Coalition, and have you heard anything back from them?
Yes, I have. I've been to some conferences with other counties, and Tommy and I spoke in Burbank last time about the Bay Area Coalition, and there are counties out there that are asking, like, how do you do this? How did you get everybody together? How did you start it? They understand and see the benefit of what we're doing. They see that strength in numbers, like if we get a train wrapped and it's going to go across all the counties, then we could share that message together. But there are a lot of the smaller counties, especially, that have asked us, how did you put that together? How did you design that? How did you come up with that idea? Where did you get your fact sheets from? And they're getting their ideas from our website. It's like we said, it's the same message. It's a fact sheet about voting by mail. You know what I mean? A fact sheet about redistricting. They're reading it. We share a lot of election ideas across the state. So I think they're benefiting from what we're doing and trying to start some of their own.
Yeah, I'll second that. It's a combination of, one, what can they learn from in terms of neighboring counties working together, for example, especially when there's a shared media market. That's when, there's a charge you can go for, say, hey, I think we can work together in this way. But also just learning from one another in terms of, a small group having a discussion, and especially when they're like-sized counties, that they all have very similar challenges at the same time. So in that way, again, learning from one another is paying off in spades by being able to do that. And not to mention just sharing the resources, the things that we've put together, can certainly go a long way with other counties, looking at them and utilizing them or modifying them for their own use and everything. I think it's just a great way to be able to, again, advocate for the profession by getting out there and educating the public about what it is we actually do. I think, goes a long way, whether it's within a group of, 3 small counties clustered together, or even as across the state, having unified messaging across the state, I think would go a long way, especially as we're getting into 2024.
Those are all great points. Thank you all so much. So it looks like that was our last question in our Q&A portion. I'm looking over to the chat just to make sure, but it looks like we wrapped up our Q&A. So now we'd like to take a little bit of time, the time we have left, to showcase the Elections Group Implementation Guide. This will actually help those of you who are at home implement a program that is similar to the Bay Area Coalition in your own jurisdiction. Danny, who's on the call today, he was really instrumental in the creation of this guide. So I'm actually going to kick things back over to him to talk a little bit about this guide and how you all can use it at home.
Thank you, Rebecca. And also, I would just real quick like to take a moment to have another one of those sort of Zoom quiet round of applauses for our panelists. Thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation, and everything that you've said has been gold and so useful, I hope, for the election officials in the audience and for anyone else who's watching. So you all sort of teed up a perfect transition for me to our implementation guide that the elections group put together. We worked on this in communication with Tommy and other officials from the Greater Bay Area Coalition. And the goal here was to come up with sort of a fun workbook style activity book that could help you, regardless of what state you're in, what county you're in, what level of funding, resources you have available, start to think about how you could form a similar group. So you'll see at the top of our guide, it starts with how to build a coalition with neighboring jurisdictions. And that's really at the heart of this project. You saw the amazing things that the Greater Bay Coalition did, but it doesn't have to be that large in scope. Just forming any sort of coalition with your neighboring jurisdictions is a great place to start improving the way that you administer elections and the way that you communicate with your voters. On the first page, we asked the question, can I pull together a coalition? Should I? I will give you a spoiler answer. Yes, you should, and you can. And then if you don't mind production, moving us to the next slide. So we're just going to very briefly give you sort of a quick sneak peek of the work group, or the workbook rather. But also, if you look in the chat, there should still be a link to the workbook. And production, if you don't mind also putting a link to the case study. One thing I also want to make sure everyone on this call reviews and reads is the case study that we did specifically on what is going on in the Greater Bay Area and the coalition they put together. It's going to give you amazing ideas and fill in some more details about the story of what's going on in the Greater Bay Area. So as far as the workbook, you'll see that we have sort of broken it up into 5 different sections. And those sections are basically going to walk you through the entire process of developing an idea for a coalition like this. Step 1 is just figuring out your idea. For Tommy, the inspiration was recognizing that there's a shared media market that affects so many counties in California, and that those counties didn't need to duplicate work, that they could work together to have synergy and make something better. Here, we're going to help you develop any kind of idea around media that might be useful for your county, your state, or a group of counties in your state. You'll see that step 2 is convening the group. We walk you, I'm sorry, if you'll return to the previous page. Convening the group will just walk you through the idea of how you're going to actually bring a group of election officials who are extremely busy together and figure out how to get this work started. Plan in detail is going to take you through a number of exercises that just basically show you all of the nitty-gritty, all of the work that goes into making an amazing program like this, and hopefully gives you some ideas to start from. Because I know for me personally, the hardest place to write, the hardest place to come up with an idea is on a blank page, on a blank Word document. So this will give you some inspiration before you get started. Step 4, implementing. That's actually going to walk you through what it looks like to take these ideas you put in the workbook and put them into the real world and make sure that they're effective for your voters in the counties that you work with. And then finally, maintaining high quality content, because as you learned from our panelists today, this isn't a one-step, you do it once and stop program. The goal here is to create a coalition that lasts in perpetuity, that continues to make voting and the act of participating in democracy better for your voters forever, moving forward into the future. And then very quickly, I just want to walk you through a couple of our exercises at the top to give you an idea, a little sneak peek of what you'll be doing as you go through this implementation guide. So as I mentioned, step 1, develop your idea. You'll see we start with a few exercises that are going to help you actually do that. Step 1, or exercise 1, is making a communication wish list. And you'll see on here, we have a bunch of examples of common communications issues that have presented themselves to local and state election officials over the past few years. That includes countering misinformation, communicating facts about election security, attracting more media attention, etc. Many of the different things that our panelists spoke about today. The goal here is to help your jurisdiction focus on what the most pressing issues for you, and to do it in a way that's easy to walk through so you don't feel overwhelmed by all of the possibilities. And then if you'll go to the next page, please. I just want to take you through 1 or 2 more of our exercises. They build on each other, as you can see here. Narrowing your list, exercise 2, is to help you sort of take that set of ideas you had and come up with a specific focus to figure out what you want to start tackling with your group. And then finally, exercise 3 from our little preview is defining your vision. And this is where you're really going to start to dig into your thesis statement, your goal, what makes your group or coalition special. So with that, that's our preview of the implementation guide. Like I said, you'll see that there's a link to that available in the chat. I encourage you, please download that. And really extra special, please download the case study about the Greater Bay Coalition, because there's just some really fantastic information in there about the work that Linda, Evelyn, Tommy, and their colleagues have done. And with that, that concludes our webinar. So thank you again to our audience and our amazing panelists for spending this hour with us and learning about this awesome program that's going on in the Bay Area. If you're interested in implementing a similar program, please visit electionsgroup.com to download a case study and guide, or email support@electionsgroup.com if you're interested in working with us.
Thank you all again for joining us today. Please join us for our next conversation in the Accelerating Excellence series. We will be discussing the Committee for Safe and Secure Elections on March 7th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you all again.
Thank you, everyone.